Hi again. John Wesley is on his deathbed. We're on page 194 of this Freedom Whence. And Bready is, I think, taking a literary liberty in musing upon what John Wesley was musing on, what he was remembering as he lay on his deathbed, knowing that he would not ever leave that house again alive. And now once more it was May 24th, 1738, the day of his spiritual baptism, the day of his rebirth. Again the anthem of St. Paul's was ringing in his ears. Again he was with the little society in Aldersgate Street. The eternal glory and power of faith now flashed afresh as a mighty revelation athwart his soul. Anew his heart was strangely warmed, and vividly he saw himself impelled to testify of the marvelous experience that there had first filled his being. Struggles and difficulties were ahead, but worry, morbidity, corroding doubt, these, heaven be praised, were nightmares of the past. Sin would tempt him, but never again could it conquer him. He had glimpsed the glory of the transfigured life. The new power possessed him. Henceforth he knew himself an approved ambassador of God. And now, as his life's work really began, the church that had ordained him, that is the Anglican Church of England, the Church of England as it's properly called, the church that had ordained him began to disown him. Go hence was Bishop Butler's advice. Pretending to any special guidance of the Holy Spirit was a horrid thing, a very horrid thing. That was the take of the general run of Church of England clergymen on Wesley's new enthusiasm. The visit to the Moravian settlements in Harnhut and Marianborn confirmed his faith, but blind, leaden officialdom ever more obdurately blocked his path. It was Whitefield who cast down the barriers. His open-air preaching to the disinherited had illumined the example and revealed the will of Christ. Was not the Sermon on the Mount preached by the Son of God in God's open air to God's wandering sheep? The brooding man now saw himself preaching on the horse fair Bristol. In the benighted multitude's dumb woe, he had heard the call of God. A national crusade had been forced upon him. Henceforth, the marketplace, the town common, the open field, the dock, the factory yard, the mouth of the pit, were to him the temple of God. And how the Holy One had sealed his witness. Strong men by the hundred had wrestled violently with the demons of sin, and by the grace of Christ had prevailed. Presently the dreamer was in the saddle, riding in sunshine and rain over plain, fell and bog, now jotting down notes for a sermon, now planning a pamphlet, now perusing a well-chosen book, now dismounting to extricate his horse from the mire. Once more he saw the mobs, raging as lions. Sticks and stones again were hurtling around his head. Satan was fighting furiously for his kingdom. But how the arm of the Lord had been revealed. What wondrous deliverances had he known. Even mob leaders had turned defenders and friends. Persecution had proved a blessing in disguise. Abruptly then the chambers of memory opened upon the itinerant and local preachers, upon the class leaders and teachers of the crusade. They now were to be numbered in thousands, a cloud of witnesses to the redeeming power of grace. The stones which the builders rejected had become a living edifice of truth. Ah, the ways of God put the pride and snobbery of man to shame. The kaleidoscope moved to Scotland. 22 times he had visited the land of the North Britons. Increasingly had he come to admire the Scots, but never quite could he understand them. The seed, however, had been faithfully sown. With what result the great reaper would know. And so to Ireland. During his 21 tours of that island, he or his associates had repeatedly been assaulted by wild, howling hordes. Nevertheless, they were a lovable people, the Irish, and his mission to them had not been in vain. Even now he could see the vast multitude falling reverently upon their knees on the docks, as from the deck of his departing ship he invoked upon them for the last time God's blessing and peace. Reverie glided on to America. Where he had failed, Whitefield had prepared the way for his disciples. Oh, the encouraging letters from Asbury and Coke, from Captain Webb and Barbara Heck. In 10 years, the preaching circuits within the young republic had increased fivefold. He himself had hoped to visit America again, but well had his place been filled. If the English colonies had separated from the motherland. Thank heaven they had not departed from him, who once more was being acknowledged and worshipped as the motherland's God. Anon came a group of old friends, Whitefield, dear George, but what holy abandon had he placed his life, with what holy abandon had he placed his life on the altar of God. Oh, the tragedy, thought the brooding man aloud, that ever we had bickered. And yes, it is true that Whitefield and Wesley had differed on many things, including salvation, but not the gospel. Not on the gospel, not on the saving gospel, but on the nature of salvation, predestination, etc. Whitefield was on the Calvinist side and Wesley was not. As though any creed or doctrine could encompass the wisdom or ways of God. Ah, here our hearts were purged, but hereafter our brains also will be purged. And Brother Charles, that is Charles Wesley, already his hymns were proving a blessing in far-flung ends of the earth. And Lady Selina, she too had been wondrously used. And that sturdy Yorkshireman, Grimshaw, Henry Venn, and the eccentric, lovable Berridge, Grace Murray, Mary Bosanquet, and his wife. All these people, of course, were disciples. Oh, they differed on many things. But Wesley influenced them all. That is, his wife, her lot, though, had not been easy. Should he not have remembered, ere he married, that a wife reasonably might expect a husband's companionship? They did not have a good marriage, apparently. And how could he grant that when his life was spent so largely on the roads? And the serene, reflective Perrone, the promising young Simeon, that is Charles Simeon, and Fletcher, the saintly John Fletcher. He had preached perfection, but Fletcher had come nearer to it, its attainment, than he, that is Wesley. Even in controversy, that gracious godly man had breathed but tender love towards his adversaries. The Blessed One, however, was merciful. He claimed no merit. He had made many mistakes, but without presumption, he trusted he had not been altogether an unprofitable servant. God knew he had striven to do all for the glory of his kingdom and the welfare of his children. Soon now he would join his friends departed, his life's work done. He was ready to go. But England, true, the revival had made religion once more vital, and God through Christ both personal and real. True, routing cynicism, fatalism, and paganism, it had established the sovereign merit of goodness and truth in countless souls. But England's need of spiritual vision still was great. The poor, how misunderstood were the poor, how neglected, how abused, how very, very much remained to be done in England. And the African slaves, their appalling wrongs cried aloud to heaven for redress. O man's inhumanity to man! Yet, God be thanked, the national conscience was steadily, if slowly, awakening. Widespread spiritual forces had been released. Something approaching a moral revolution was underway. Already there were Wilberforces, Clarksons, and Sharps spending their lives for the Negro's cause. The world is my parish had not been preached for naught. But hark, the brooding, stricken man roused himself as from slumber. The great clock was striking. His half-hour of solitude was more than up. Someone was vigorously tapping on the door. Anxious voices were heard without. Wesley's musing ceased. In the next section, Crossing the Bar.